Hey everyone, and welcome. We spend so much time trying to figure out our relationships. Why some of us feel so safe and others feel so anxious. Or why some of us keep people at a distance. Well, today we're going way, way back to the very beginning. We're going to the construction site of our personality to see how that foundation was laid, brick by painful or perfect brick. We're diving into the architecture of attachment.
So, let's just start with the biggest and maybe the most painful question of all. How does this happen? How do we end up on our specific relationship path? What is that moment, that fork in the road, that pretty much sets the course for how we connect with people for years and years to come?
Well, the answer really lies in this thing called our inner working model. The best way to think about it is like an internal compass. It's built in our earliest years, and it's what we use to navigate, well, everything. And the main architects of this compass? It's just two things, our tiny infant brain and the caregivers who are right there with us.
Okay, so let's set the scene. Imagine an infant. They're in distress. Maybe they're hungry, or cold, or just scared. They have zero ability to solve this problem on their own. The only tool they have in their entire toolkit is a cry. And it is so important to get this. That cry is not a trick, it's not a whim, it is a biological distress signal. It's a desperate call for rescue. And then, an adult shows up. And what happens in the next 30 seconds? That moment, right there, is the single brick from which a child's entire psychological world is built. Let's take a look at how this can play out.
So first up, let's look at the ideal scenario. This is the blueprint for what we call secure attachment, where the biggest lesson a child learns is that the world is fundamentally a safe place to be.
In this version of the story, the adult picks up the crying baby. Their body is relaxed, their touch is confident. They're not just going through the motions to stop the noise, they're actually connecting. They make eye contact, they soften their voice, they soothe the baby's little nervous system. And the message that lands in the infant's brain is just profound. My signals matter. When I call out, the world actually responds to me.
Now, you repeat this little dance thousands and thousands of times, and the child's brain starts to wire itself with some incredible lessons. I matter. The world is a pretty responsive place. Feeling stressed isn't the end of the world. It's something I can handle with help. And over time, safety just becomes the default setting. It's an expectation, not some kind of shocking miracle.
But what happens when the response is different? Well, this is how an insecure foundation gets built, and it usually branches off into two very distinct survival strategies: anxiety and avoidance.
So let's imagine a more chaotic scene. The adult comes, but you never know what you're going to get. One minute they're gentle and loving, the next they're irritated, rough, maybe even overwhelmed and crying themselves. For the baby, there's no pattern, it's just confusing, and that confusion creates a state of constant, low-level panic.
So, from all this chaos, the brain has to come up with a plan to survive. The first one is the anxious strategy. The child's brain basically learns, okay, if the response is unpredictable, I've just got to turn up the volume. I have to cry louder, cling harder, and basically manage my caregiver's mood just to feel safe. But there's another path the brain can take, and that leads to the avoidance strategy.
This happens in the rejecting scenario. In this case, the adult consistently ignores the cry, or they respond with clear irritation. You know, the "what do you want now" kind of energy. The touch is purely functional, not comforting. And the child's incredibly adaptive brain draws a really painful conclusion. My signals just annoy people. My needs are a burden, and showing any kind of weakness just leads to rejection.
So what does this do to them? Well, for the anxious child, anxiety just becomes the background music of their life. It's always there. For the avoidant child, they learn a different trick. They learn to self-regulate by just shutting down their emotions. They stop crying not because they feel better, but because they've learned that nobody is coming. They've given up hope.
And now we have to talk about the fourth and most traumatic scenario. This isn't just about a caregiver being inconsistent or rejecting. This is about the entire system breaking down.
See, in this situation, the caregiver, the one person who is biologically wired to be a safe haven, is also the source of terror. This could be because of abuse, or maybe the caregiver has their own terrifying, out-of-control behaviors. For an infant's brain, this is a puzzle that is literally impossible to solve.
It creates this terrifying biological paradox. The very person the child needs to run to for safety is the exact same person they need to run from to survive. The brain's attachment system gets two commands at the exact same time: activate and deactivate, seek comfort and escape danger. And with nowhere to go, the whole system just short circuits.
And the result is a total collapse. This isn't really an attachment style anymore. It's the disintegration of any coherent strategy at all. The child's reactions become totally chaotic. They might freeze up, dissociate and stare into space, or swing wildly between terror and rage.
Okay, so we've seen the 4 different ways this foundation can be built. But what does this all mean for us right now? Let's unpack the really important takeaways, because this is absolutely not about blaming our parents.
There are 3 really crucial things to get here. First, this isn't about good or bad parents. It's about their functionality. A parent could love their child more than anything, but be so consumed by their own trauma or depression or just sheer poverty that they have nothing left to give emotionally. Second, this stuff is formed from the average of thousands of interactions. It's not about one bad day. And third, and this is huge, this is biological. It physically shapes the wiring of a developing brain.
And that leads to maybe the most important takeaway of all. If you recognize yourself in any of these insecure patterns, please hear this. You are not broken. You are a brilliant adapter. Your childhood psyche chose the absolute best strategy it could come up with to survive the world it was in. It was an act of profound, unconscious intelligence.
So with all of that on the table, what's the most important message to walk away with? Where do we go from here with this knowledge?
And the message is this, loud and clear. Your attachment style is not a prison. It's not a life sentence. It is a starting position. This knowledge isn't meant to trap you. It's meant to give you a map. And knowing where you started is the first crucial step toward choosing where you want to go.
Look, we can't get in a time machine and change what happened. That's a fact. But as adults, we have a new power and a new responsibility. We can start to consciously give ourselves the calm, predictable, and kind responses that maybe we didn't get. We can actually change the imprint the past left on our nervous system one new choice at a time.
This knowledge turns you from a passenger in your own life into the driver. It gives you context, it gives you compassion for yourself, and maybe most importantly, it gives you a choice. So the question isn't really about where you came from anymore. The real question is, now that you have the map, where will you choose to build your path now?